In this lecture, we're going to speak about arrays in JavaScript. I'm assuming you already know what arrays are, but if you don't, arrays are just a collection of data. In JavaScript, however, since we have dynamic typing, arrays take on a pretty interesting set of properties. So right now I'm in Sublime Text and I'm looking at script.js and I'm located in the lecture 50 folder. Okay, so let me close the browser and let's create an array. So let's call it var array and we'll say new array. Once I created the array, I could now set items into that array. And arrays are zero based. So I could say 0, and let's say in the first position, which is position 0, I'll place a string and I'll use my name, Yaakov. In the second position, which is position 1, I'll place a number, let's say 2. In the third position, which is 2, I'll place a function. And let's say it's going to be a function that you could pass a name to. And let's put a semicolon there. And all of this function is going to do is just going to say hello and whatever the name is plus name. Okay, so in the third position, which is right here, or the fourth position, I should say, I'm going to place an object literal. We'll put a semicolon over there. And the object literal will say course, that's the property name, and the name of the course is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, so here's my array. And if I do a console.log on the array itself, you'll see that we have the array. And as you can see inside the array, we have different types of objects stored there. Some are just primitives, and some are strings, some are functions, which are also objects, and some are just object. So because of dynamic typing, in JavaScript, I'm able to store different types of objects in the same array, which is not true of most languages. Most languages, when you have an array and you store data in an array, the data in one particular array has to be of the same type. And if you want to have more than one type, you have to separate it into separate arrays. And just like I set the values using this brackets operator, I can also retrieve the values using the brackets operator. So for example, I could say console.log and I can output array sub1 or sub1 right here. So array sub1 meaning I want to go to the second item in the array, which is right here, and I want to output it to the screen using a console.log. So if I save that and you see it prints out 2. Furthermore, since at position 3, or really at index 2 here, we have a function, I can invoke this function very easily using the array notation. So I'll say array, and it's at position 2. So I'll say position 2. And now since at position 2 is the value, what's sitting in here in this position 2 is the value of the function. So that's the function value. Not the return of the function, but just the function value. Which means, in order to invoke it, all I have to do is put parentheses after it. And once I do, I can save it and undefined. And the reason it says hello undefined is because I never passed name. So let's go ahead and say Yaakov and save that. Now it says hello Yaakov. But I can even do something more fun than that. I can actually pass in the array because I already have Yaakov stored right here. So I could say I'm passing in an array and it's in position 0. So now what I'm doing is I'm retrieving position 0 of this array, which is Yaakov string, and I'm passing it to position 2 value, which is the value of the function. So the function is getting executed against the value Yaakov. So if I save that, I'll get again the same thing, hello Yaakov. Likewise, I could certainly retrieve a property of a literal object that is stored inside the array. So I could say here console.log, and I could say array sub3 or index 3, and I could say dot course, and that should print out HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Let's go ahead and save that, and it says HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, I can also create arrays using a shorthand array notation. So let me go ahead and comment this out so it doesn't crowd our console. So we'll save it and we'll clear the console. Let's go ahead and say shorthand array creation. Okay, so what we're going to do is say var names, and we're going to create an array simply by providing and empty brackets. So empty brackets now creates an array in the variable names. And what I could do is I could start listing my names. Yaakov, John, Joe, let's say. Okay, so if I do console.log now, on the names, I should say that, or see that array right there, Yaakov, John, and Joe. So that works, great. So now you see there's two ways to create an array. One is kind of a longhand notation where you say new array, and the other one simply by kind of like an array literal, something like that. But so you just use the brackets and you separate the array values by a comma. And again, I could put whatever I want in here. So if I wanted to, let's say, I can actually use spacing here like this. And if I wanted to, I could create an object here. So let's say I could create an object and say name Yaakov and comma, there's another object here. If I wanted to have an object, we'll do name John. And I can actually leave it here because arrays are not restricted to have the same type. So if I save that, and I'll see object Joe, right? So if I actually open that up, it'll let me open this object and you'll see array Yaakov, name Yaakov, and the same one is, second one is name John. Okay, but let's undo that for now. Let's go back to the regular array we had before. And let's go ahead and loop over this array, printing out each name. Let's say hello to each name. So for that, we're going to use a regular for loop. We'll say var I equals 0. And we need to keep looping until it's the end of the array. Well, there's 3 items in the array. And each array object has a special property called length. And it's not a function, it's just a property that the JavaScript engine sets for you. So array names.length will give me the length of the array. In this case, it'll be 3. So what I'm saying is that I want my loop variable to be 0, 1, and 2, and when it's 3, it's no longer going to be less than the length of the array, and it will quit. Okay, so let's go ahead and print hello to the console. So we'll say console.log, and we'll say hello, space, and then we'll say names, bracket I. So now every time through the loop, the I is going to change, and it's going to say hello to a different name. Let's go ahead and maybe comment that out so we don't see that on the console. And we save it, and we say hello Yaakov, hello John, hello Joe. Now what's interesting about arrays in JavaScript is that they can even be sparse. So let's go ahead and make some room here. And I could say something like names, and I could say names 100, and I could set that value to be, let's say, Jim. So now we have an array that has 0, 1, and 2 index and an 100 index, and in between there's nothing there. So if I actually go ahead and take that here and paste that loop right here and execute it, what we're going to see is it said hello Yaakov, hello John, hello Joe, and it starts that again, hello Yaakov, hello Joe, and then 97 times it just says hello undefined. Because what we're doing here is we're saying I want you to retrieve names with an index of 4 and 5 and 6 and so on. And those indices just don't exist in this particular array. But 100 does exist, so therefore you see when it gets to 100, it prints out hello Jim. There is one more issue with arrays that you should be aware of, and we'll discuss that issue in part 2 of this lecture.